China's economy is breaking again. Is the second time this week?
China is defending Iranian aggression in the Middle East. And U.S.
Wait, China's doing what?
officials are headed to China for even more economic talks, even as the Chinese steel industry might be collapsing.
Might be.
Then more on this week's China News Headline.
I'll be there next week.
Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you
Surfshark doesn't work in China, so he's not paying for his sponsor here.
and light. Conflict in the Middle East. China is supporting Iran in the recent Middle East tension.
So he's quoting Voice of America. Voice of America is a propaganda agency paid by the United States Congress. Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, and yeah.
Have escalated over the past few weeks, because of course it is. On Sunday, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi held a phone call with the Islamic Republic's acting foreign minister, where he repeated Beijing's denunciation of the assassination of the Hamas leader in Tehran. Because China would never try to take out political enemies in another country, and especially not using a series of secret police stations located in countries all around the world, hypothetically.
So can you quote any political leader that China killed around the world? And those secret police stations, they are not secret at all. There's a sign in front of it. Meanwhile, FBI has over 160 police stations around the world. The DEA has over 100 police stations around the world. But hey, you're American, right? This doesn't bother you.
So far, nobody has claimed responsibility for the killing, but it's widely believed that Israel was behind it. And Iran and its proxies are threatening to respond militarily.
So he's poking China for supposedly killing political leaders around the world, but then he says Israel did, and it's okay, right? It's fine.
Chinese Communist Party said the assassination endangers ceasefire talks for Gaza and regional stability. And if anyone would know anything about destabilizing regions, it's the Chinese Communist Party.
Man, you are from the United States. Are you kidding?
Wang stressed that China supports Iran in defending its sovereignty, security, and national dignity in accordance with the law, and in its efforts to maintain regional peace and stability, and stands ready to maintain close communication with Iran. I wonder if China would support Taiwan or the Philippines in defending their sovereignty. Given that Iran is funding terror, helping Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and potentially threatening a wider war in the Middle East, I'm not sure how even the CCP...
This guy is insane. So Israel is attacking Lebanon, is attacking Iran, is attacking Gaza, but Iran somehow is the one threatening a bigger war? Does this make any sense?
He can seriously believe that Iran is engaged in efforts to maintain regional peace and stability. So they're either lying, stupid, or perhaps most likely, stupid liars. But the CCP support for Tehran isn't stopping the U.S. from sending officials to China for even more economic meetings.
Oh, so U.S. officials will come to beg for money, as always.
Which, as I've covered, has been about as effective as protecting yourself from a tsunami using a flamingo inner tube. The meeting started Thursday and continued on Friday and are aimed at keeping ties steady between Washington and Beijing despite rising tensions. According to the head of the delegation, the gathering builds on Janet Yellen and Joe Biden's guidance to establish durable lines of communication as we responsibly manage our relationship with China. And according to the Treasury, officials are also expected to discuss possible revisions to China's anti-money laundering law. But given past...
So the United States is coming here to ask for changes on China law? Does this make any sense for you?
results, this gathering is even less likely to result in decency and sound financial decisions than the gathering of the juggalos. There are certainly plenty of economic issues to address in China, especially since its steel industry could be headed toward a severe crisis. China's steel market is the world's biggest by far, but property downturn and weaker factory activity so far this year have weakened domestic demand. As a result, mills are seeing large losses,
that's true,
and prices have plunged to multi-year lows. The chairman of China's Baowu Steel Group Corporation told his company's half-year meeting that the crisis will be longer and more difficult to endure than we expected. which is actually a pretty great slogan for the CCP as a whole. Baowu alone produces 7% of the world's steel, and the chairman's comments contributed on Wednesday to weakness across iron ore and steel markets. According to the Hindustan Times, in the previous slumps during the Great Recession and from 2015 to 2016, the CCP resolved the crises through massive stimulus. But that's looking more remote in 2024 as Xi Jinping bids to reshape the economy. Given that China's economy is already in a slump, that's not a good sign.
It's already in a slump. China's economy is growing almost 6% in 2024. It grew over 5% in 2023. The United States is close to a recession. But somehow, China's economy is bad.
It's like having your house catch on fire, then deciding now is the time to install a jacuzzi.
Man, you're literally talking about the United States.
And all Baowu had to offer in the way of advice was calling on employees to save cash and minimize risk, which is about as comforting as being on a flight that's going down and the captain comes on the PA to say, "Pray to whomever you believe in." Speaking of minimizing...
Does this paper has any information at all, or he just shake it just to show that he's like reading something? Or
risks, a new report is showing that nearly all Chinese banks are refusing to process payments from Russia. Maybe all those warnings from Blinken and Yellen at previous economic talks worked after all. Just goes to show, if at first you don't...
The warns. That's how the United States come to discuss things, warns.
Try again. The pro-Kremlin Russian media outlet Izvestia reports that 98% of Chinese banks, even smaller regional ones, are refusing to accept direct Chinese payment transfers from Russia. Back in May and June, some of those smaller financial companies were still processing Russian payments, but it looks like something's changed over the past 3 weeks. So once again, we find there are limits in the no-limit partnership. Kind of like how the never-ending soup, salad, and breadsticks at Olive Garden do end when they drag me out of the restaurant kicking and screaming at closing time. Last month, Russia media outlet Kommersant reported that about 80% of bank transfers made in yuan were bouncing back with no explanation after the payments were stalled for weeks while banks decided whether they could fulfill the transaction. So yes, something's definitely changed. Izvestia says the payment challenges with Chinese banks could contribute to supply chain difficulties and inflation in Russia. The Kremlin is working on setting up alternatives such as cryptocurrency. You know you're in a sad state of affairs when crypto is your most reliable form of currency.
I don't understand much about this relationship between China and Russia, but I don't think this will be a big problem for long.
According to Reuters, Moscow and Beijing are considering reviving barter trade to get around sanctions and maintain their partnership. Yes, bartering. I guess if these regimes are going to conduct themselves like it's the Dark Ages, fitting they trade like it too. China does have a history of using bartering for trade. Such arrangements were common during the Soviet era, but disappeared shortly after the USSR collapsed. But in 2019, China agreed to trade palm oil worth nearly $150 million from Malaysia for construction services, natural resources products, and civilian and defense equipment. I guess that's a decent trade since palm oil is better than what China usually sells, which is snake oil. Then in 2021, to get around sanctions on Iran, a Chinese company exported auto parts worth $2 million to the country in exchange for pistachios. I would hope they at least gave them unshelled pistachios, preferably chili lime flavor. But a barter economy is pretty embarrassing.
This guy thinks he's funny, right?
Two countries that wish to be seen as global powers. And it doesn't look promising for Putin's alliance with Xi. With some Chinese banks rejecting payments in the ruble and hesitant to do business with Russia through Hong Kong, some Russian companies are still sending yuan to China through Russian bank branches on the mainland, but they face a 5% markup. And since it's likely that some Chinese companies will still refuse even those payments, going through friendly third countries and bartering are likely to dominate trade between the two countries going forward. Hey, maybe China will learn to enjoy it and try to get everything they want this way. Hey, Taiwan, if you give up your sovereignty and let us rule...
Taiwan has no sovereignty. What are you talking about?
Got plenty of palm oil. And after the break, is the CCP still trying to mediate between Russia and Ukraine? Welcome back.
That was a very short break.
China is calling on Ukraine and Russia to de-escalate tensions in their war, which is like a call to end gun violence hosted by Duke Nukem.
No, because I think the best solution is to send more weapons to Ukraine, maybe to sell more weapons to Ukraine, right? Instead of, hey, Russia and Ukraine, let's talk, let's try to solve all these issues in a diplomatic way. No. Let's send more weapons. For sure this will help to stop this war, right? Right? Oh, that's funny because probably this will happen in Ukraine somehow, at some point. Last week, the Taliban did a military parade with all the equipment left by United States Army when the United States Army ran away from the country, from Afghanistan 3 years ago. So over $7 billion they left behind to the Taliban. Now they are using and they are doing parades with it. It's amazing. And you guys in the US are paying for it. Amazing, right?
Came as Ukraine launched a military operation into Russia's Kursk region and has continued expanding its control there amid a flailing response by the Kremlin. Wait, did Zelensky just create his own special limited military operation in Russia? Touché.
No, it's not his. And everybody knows that. It's not his. It's NATO pushing it. If it was not NATO, this war would be over already a long time ago.
Putin, how he
Actually, if it was not NATO, there was no war.
Taste of his own medicine, but we all know his medicine is poison. China's foreign ministry said that all parties should observe the 3 principles for de-escalating the situation, namely no expansion of the battlefield, no escalation of fighting, and no fueling the flame by any party. Interestingly, the CCP had nothing to say about Russia's expansion of the battlefield a few months ago into Kharkiv and its continued escalation of missile strikes on Ukraine. The CCP also said it will continue to maintain communication with the international community to play a constructive role for the political settlement of the crisis. And I'm sure they'll be effective. Just
of
as
course
much
not.
as I'm sure Duke Nukem is able to resolve conflicts with therapy and hugs.
Of course will not be effective because Europe, United States wants more wars. That's what they do. United States is always involved in wars. They have been in wars for over 200 years. That's what they do. They are merchants of death. They're making a lot of money selling weapons to this war in Ukraine because those weapons are not for free. Nothing is for free. Someone is paying for it. They don't want this to end.
Speaking of Chinese de-escalation, the Philippines has condemned Chinese military actions in the South China Sea over the past few days. Last week, both countries held military exercises in the region.
Okay.
China on its own, while the Philippines conducted joint exercises with the US, Japan, Canada, and Australia. On Thursday, things got particularly heated when 2 Chinese aircraft dropped flares in the path of a Philippine aircraft during a routine patrol around the disputed Scarborough Shoal. So predictably, the Philippines and China condemned each other.
Yeah,
China
that's
blamed
normal.
the Philippines for disrupting its military exercises, which sounds like punching someone and saying, "Get out of the way of my fists." But Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. called Beijing's actions unjustified, illegal, and reckless.
Oh, I think China should start doing some military exercise close to United States coast, like they do here all the time. Because you see, for this guy here, it's normal that Canada, Australia, and United States are doing military exercise in the South China Sea, right? South China Sea. But I wonder what reaction would be in the United States if China was doing the same, like in Miami, close to California. What would be the United States reaction? How do you think the world would be? How crazy it would be?
And urged China to act responsibly in both the sea and the skies, to which China probably responded by saying, "But you didn't say the land." A deal between the Philippines and China on a Filipino outpost in the South China Sea is up for future review. Last month, the 2 countries reached a vague provisional agreement after repeated altercations near the Second Thomas Shoal. The agreement would allow for humanitarian resupply of items like food, water, and medicine to Filipino military personnel on the World War II-era ship Sierra Madre, which the Philippines grounded in 1999 and uses as a base. But the quite literal flare-up recently could complicate that arrangement.
Imagine if it was China doing the same. just throwing a World War II ship somewhere in the ocean and say, look, that's our military base now. This is ours. Imagine how this guy would react. But it's Filipinas. Filipinas now somehow is, and nobody knows why, is a United States partner, because the United States used to colonize Philippines 60, 70 years ago. But imagine if it was China doing the same.
Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Maria Teresa Lazaro said the review will be there when that will be is subject to further discussion. Oh, so like the kettlebells I bought during COVID, they're there, but who knows when I'll actually use them. She also reiterated that the understanding reached with the CCP only applies to the Second Thomas Shoal and doesn't change Manila's stance on the South China Sea as a whole. Both sides agreed not to disclose details of the deal without the other country's input, but given the continuing tensions and the fact that this is the CCP we're talking about, this deal will probably last about as long as J-Lo's concert tour. Now I want to give a big thank you to
We are not doing this here now. Again, his speech is always against China, always, no matter what. China is trying to do peace in Ukraine, bad. China is trying to do something nice, bad. It's always bad. No matter what, it's always bad. So the bias is too strong. And of course, he's a media arm from right-wing cult. This cult is forbidden in China. I'm not expecting him to be like balanced. I understand that he's very, very biased against China, but whatever China does is bad.